How's it going, everyone? My name's Manny. On this channel, I want to talk about kind of everything in life. I want to cover everything from politics to kind of society at large, charity, giving back, and kind of just the general idea of freedom and liberty. I also want to do some commentary work here, and I know that the commentary bubble of YouTube is kind of known as the toxic place of this platform, and I really don't want to fall into that trap. I don't want to be seen as a bully or a negative force at all. I just kind of want to give you guys information from just different view in general, I guess. I understand that this video title can seem maybe a little bit on the nose or offensive to some people. It's not at all intended to belittle anyone or put anyone down at all. The whole point of this video essentially is just to kind of cover who conservatives are, what they stand for, and kind of the impact and, in a lot of ways, the damage that conservative ideals have done to society as a whole, and not even just American society, but in the global sense. And I want to be transparent in letting you guys know that I grew up in a very far right-wing, I guess you would say, conservative evangelical home and church. I wanted to get that out there just to kind of get any maybe subconscious biases that I may have out there in the open, and to just be open and transparent with you guys. Modern day conservatism really began in the 1950s. Obviously, the idea of conservatism existed for quite a while before that time, but most historians generally say the 1950s are really when modern day conservatism developed into a cohesive political movement. And while there's never actually been a conservative party, and conservatives don't really even have a powerful caucus within either of the major two parties, they still hold a ton of political power in this country. There are conservatives on the left in the Democrat Party. They're called Blue Dog Democrats. They're mostly the older generation, the older baby boomer age people who may have certain conservative leanings but still tend to vote Democrat. An important thing to remember about conservatives in this country is their really close ties to religion, specifically traditionally right-wing sects of Christianity like evangelicals, non-denominational Protestants, Mormons, and some Catholics are really strong supporters of conservative ideals and conservative candidates for the most part in this country. This tie that conservatives have to religion generally has made conservatism a movement that has consistently attempted to use the government to enforce Christian ethics and ideals. Conservatism can really be broken up into two main groups, which would be fiscal conservatives and social conservatives. There are more factions within the conservative movement, but in general, those are the two big groups. As their name suggests, very briefly I'll explain, fiscal conservatives are people who just want less government spending on kind of social issues. Most of them are okay with military spending, though. They want, in general, greater fiscal responsibility from their government. Social conservatives are the people who advocate for more government intervention to stop things that they view as immoral. There are Americans who view themselves as fiscally conservative, but not socially, and vice versa. It is more rare to find people who are social conservatives but aren't fiscal conservatives. Most people who are socially conservative are also fiscally conservative. Things like drug use and gay marriage are some of the major issues that social conservatives actively spend a lot of money and time and political will fighting against. So, in general, conservatives are pro American exceptionalism, family values, limited government, individualism, and a strong military force. The first example of how conservatism has ruined America involves the drug war. Conservatives have long supported the laws that have restricted the purchase and use and sale and possession and trafficking of any kind of narcotic. In the past 2 decades, they've spent millions of dollars intentionally attempting to keep marijuana illegal across the country, even for medicinal use. Conservatives have actually fought to give the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration, more money every year, and have supported laws that reinforce the drug war. At this point, the US government is giving upwards of $30 billion a year to this one organization alone. The drug war was mainly started under Republican President Richard Nixon in the 1970s. The war on drugs, unfortunately, has, by every metric, been an abject failure, and actually has a lot of roots in racial discrimination. Ads in the 1960s really tried to tie marijuana to Mexicans and opiates like heroin to African Americans. And they really tried to demonize both of these communities and these drugs as a scare tactic. These types of ads even went so far as to claim that if you smoked marijuana, you could end up in a murderous rage, which we now know is obviously not true. Even Nixon's own policy chief, John Ehrlichman, once said, and I quote, "We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black. But by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and the blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did." Unquote. In the Reagan era, conservatives really gave the war on drugs a shot in the arm with the 1986 Anti-Drug Abuse Act. This created mandatory minimums for almost all drug offenses, unfortunately, and this had really far-reaching consequences for the poor, for minorities, and pretty much for the entire correctional system. From the beginning of the drug war in 1971, addiction rates really haven't changed by any significant margin. Long-term figures and charts really show that addiction ebbs and flows over the years, but since 1971 has not really dropped at all. And similarly, teenage drug use has not dropped by any significant margin since the beginning of the drug war in 1971. What has increased significantly, though, are the amount of overdoses, the number of imprisoned Americans, and the amount of gangland-style murders. Between Mexico and the Philippines alone, over 212,000 people have been killed in recent years as a result of the drug war. The amount of overdose deaths in the US actually rose from 16,800 in 1999 to over 70,000 in 2017. These statistics are shocking to say the least, and they prove that the drug war is not only a failure, but that it's actually having the opposite of its stated intended effect. One of the main problems with prohibition is that whether you're targeting alcohol or drugs, legislation doesn't stop the demand for drugs. What it does is actually eliminates the safe production of these drugs that people are going to be taking anyway. With drug prohibition being strongly enforced, there aren't companies that are actually making these narcotics in laboratories. They are being made by untrained chemists in dirty laboratories with zero quality control. While the exact number is hard to pin down, estimates show that the drug war has cost the US taxpayers over $1 trillion since 1971, and that the yearly costs for the drug war are anywhere between $47 and $78 billion a year. In 2018, American law enforcement agencies arrested over 10.3 million people. 1.6 million of these were for drugs. More than 85% of those arrests were for possession alone. This tells us that the vast majority of those people who are being arrested for drug offenses are not kingpins, they're users. The effect this has on communities is devastating and really can't be overstated. Breaking down the numbers regarding the demographics of drug arrests is pretty daunting, so I'm just going to touch on the basics right now. On average, just under 50% of the people who are arrested for drug crimes yearly are Black or Latino. And statistically, the poorer the neighborhood you live in, the more likely you are to be arrested for drug crimes regardless of your race. Many adults who are arrested for a drug offense end up losing their jobs due to mischiefs from things like court dates or jail time, but it's difficult for them to find employment and even education in the future because of their new record. So this puts those who are convicted of a drug offense in a dire place financially, and if they have children, the situation can become even more dire. All of these facts lead us to the question of why. Why do conservatives continue to push for more drug laws? Why do we as Americans continue to accept the drug war as the status quo? Why does the movement that is supposed to believe in fiscal responsibility find it acceptable to spend tens of billions of dollars a year on a war that has clearly failed? Between the hundreds of thousands of deaths from violence, the hundreds of thousands of overdoses, the millions of incarcerations, and the trillions of dollars spent, is this a war worth continuing? The second example of how conservatism is ruining America involves gay marriage. In another attempt to legislate morality, conservatives led a multi-year, multi-million-dollar nationwide effort to stop gay marriage from becoming legal in the United States. The lightning rod case for this cause was Proposition 8 in California. So Prop 8 was proposed in 2008 and actually amended the California Constitution. It would have amended the Constitution to solely recognize marriage as being an institution between one man and one woman, which would have effectively eliminated gay marriage in the state forever. Their reasoning had nothing to do with small government. This was pursued solely on religious grounds. Conservatives argued that gay marriage was an affront to God, that it lessened the value of straight marriage, and that it would lead to a slippery slope of degeneracy. They argued that if gays could marry, next we would have people marrying animals and forcing churches to perform gay weddings, thus encroaching on religious liberty. This is what turned a state proposition into a national fight, pitting conservatives against almost everybody else on the political spectrum. While Proposition 8 was a California proposition, an enormous concerted effort by conservatives, the larger Republican Party, and many, many Christian churches and organizations was organized to ensure its passage nationwide. The Mormon Church alone spent an estimated $22 million on the initiative in California. The movement collected hundreds of thousands of signatures and millions of dollars just to get the proposition on the ballot in California. Because California has a hypermajority of Democrats in Sacramento, conservatives knew that making gay marriage illegal was not going to stand a chance in the legislature, even in the early 2000s when most Democrats still opposed gay marriage. This is why they took it directly to the voters on the ballot, which had the added benefit of giving conservatives the talking point of this being the will of the people if it passed. And on November 4th, 2008, Proposition 8 passed with 52% of the vote. This initiative was later ruled unconstitutional numerous times and was struck down for good by the US Supreme Court, who actually believed that it violated the principle of equal protection under the law, and the belief by the court that the conservatives who actually brought the lawsuit had not been harmed by the legalization of same-sex marriage. Essentially, this massive waste of taxpayer time, money, and manpower was a concerted effort by conservatives to force their religious beliefs upon others. Again, this leads me to question conservatives. How is making gay marriage illegal in line with your small government ideology? And why is it okay to hold other people to your religious standards? If another religion becomes the majority in America, do you want to be forced to follow their religious beliefs? And what arguments do you have that don't include religion against gay marriage? These are two examples of how conservative ideology has damaged our society as a whole. Again, this video isn't meant to demean or belittle anyone. I just want people to understand the far-reaching consequences that conservatism has had on the US and the world at large. With all that being said, I want to end each video by encouraging you to do something for someone else today. Reach out to someone you know is struggling and just show them that you care. Donate your time or resources to a local food bank or a cause that is important to you. And until next time, bye guys.